everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on Thursday, September 5th, 2024. A really interesting story here today. But first, a reminder, we do not have a vid chat tomorrow afternoon. The vid chats for September will start a week from tomorrow, so please remember to check the schedule on the website. All the vid chats for the rest of the year are scheduled. The schedule is posted on the website. Please also remember that we're entering that time of year when weather where I live can change on a dime, quite literally, overnight, and literally within a matter of minutes. So please remember to keep abreast of schedule changes on the website forum. If I have to reschedule vid chats due to the possibility of heavy or severe weather, then I usually will post that on the website forum and on my Facebook page. Now, we've got an interesting story today from Children's Health Defense, which is, of course, Robert Kennedy Jr.'s website and organization. And this is a really, really interesting story to me because it would appear that Mr. Kennedy's organization is going after the whole globaloniest world health structure. This article is titled, "We Will Not Comply with Pandemic Treaty, 26 Republican Governors Tell the World Health Organization." This is an article by Dr. Suzanne Burdick, who I believe has a PhD in medicine. So I want to read several paragraphs here. There are a number of paragraphs that are extremely interesting because of the implications of what they say. But here's the opening of the article. Quote, 26 United States governors, over half of the nation's state leaders, have stated publicly that they will not comply with a World Health Organization-led global attempt at controlling Americans' health. In their August 29th statement, the 26 governors, all Republicans, and the Republican Governors Association accused the World Health Organization of, quote, attempting one world control over health policy, unquote, by promoting a pandemic agreement or pandemic treaty. Quote, put simply, they wrote, Republican governors will not comply. Now let me stop, because if for whatever reason that treaty should make it through the United States Senate and be ratified and signed by the president, this statement of noncompliance, of course, raises all sorts of issues. How will they enforce it, or are they simply grandstanding and going to do what Republicans have done so often in the past, and that's cave in once push comes to shove? I hope not. But what is really interesting to me is the take that Mr. Kennedy's organization is taking with respect to this whole issue. So in a few paragraphs from what I just read, we reread the following. Quote, health freedom activist Dr. Merrill Nass, an internist and founder of Door to Freedom, an organization that lobbied against the World Health Organization pandemic treaty proposals, told the Defender that the governor's statement is, quote, very necessary at this time, unquote, because the United Nations, which runs the World Health Organization, quote, seeks to gain world control over emergencies such as cyber emergencies, supply chain emergencies, or outer space emergencies, unquote. Now let that sink in, folks. Cyber emergencies, supply chain emergencies, or outer space emergencies. In other words, the UN is maneuvering to get its actual sovereignty on a global scale recognized via one of these three types of emergency. That's a stunning admission. To continue, quote, "The jig is up," Nass said. "It has become widely understood that the UN system is being used in an attempt to centralize its control and usurp national sovereignty," unquote. The governors said they refused to comply with the World Health Organization pandemic agreement because it would consolidate power in the hands of the World Health Organization, thereby threatening national sovereignty, states' rights, and U.S. Americans' constitutionally guaranteed freedoms. Nass said this was every Republican governor in the United States with the single exception of Vermont Republican Governor Phil Scott. He governs a state that is strongly Democrat and may have felt he could not expend the political capital required to go along and make this statement unanimous, unquote. Now, I'm skipping one very short paragraph here. According to the letter, the World Health Organization's proposed treaty would, quote, "empower the World Health Organization, particularly its uncontrollable Director General, with the authority to restrict the rights of U.S. citizens, including such freedoms as speech, privacy, travel, choice of medical care, and informed consent, thus violating our Constitution's core principles," unquote. In other words, a huge replay of the whole COVID plan scamdemic, folks. That is. I now think that this is confirmation that the whole COVID plan scamdemic thing was a beta test. It was testing how this country would respond. And as we've seen, it responded very badly, or failed any sort of test that it was going to look out for its national sovereignty and interests, as opposed to the globalists creating the pandemic. Now, towards the end of this article, we get more stunning paragraphs, and these are really what caught my attention. Quote, "Action by U.S. states," this is Children's Health Defender, "action by U.S. states was central to defeating the World Health Organization plan to centralize control of public health during declared emergencies," Nass told the Defender. Quote, "Children's health defense and Door to Freedom were central in devising this strategy," unquote, she said, adding, quote, "The Constitution's 10th Amendment reserves for the states all powers that were not specifically granted to the central government." Healthcare was never a federal authority. Therefore, we urge citizens to contact their attorneys general, governors, legislators, and federal officials to demand they not turn over authority for health to the World Health Organization, unquote. In other words, I hope you heard that and let that sink in, because it was, according to this article, it was Children's Health Defense, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s organization, that devised this strategy of resisting the World Health Organization via an appeal to the 10th Amendment, of the Bill of Rights to the Constitution, that powers not specifically and explicitly delegated to the federal government were reserved to the states. And it was therefore Children's Health Defense that lay behind the strategy of getting the Republican governors to resist and go on record and say that they will not comply with any World Health Organization dictates. Now, this to me is extremely interesting, because Mr. Kennedy knows as well as anyone else that the Constitution also specifies that any treaty that is ratified by the country becomes the law of the land. So, in other words, does the treaty take precedence over the Bill of Rights, or do the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment, does that remain sacrosanct? I would argue that there is no constitutional authority for the federal government to enter a treaty which in turn could be taken as nullifying any provision of the Constitution. Period. So this is a really telling thing. It's telling also because it's an indicator that perhaps Mr. Kennedy, long before he came out and formally endorsed President Trump and broke with the Democratic Party, which you'll recall in his own remarks, he pointed out that the party leadership had left him. He's still the same kind of Democrat that he's always been, but the party itself has become non-democratic. It's resorting to coups d'etat. It's installing candidates that have had no electoral victory. Witness what they did to Senator Sanders back in 2016. Now what they've most recently done with President Biden and Vice President Harris, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting to me that this is an indicator that the break with the Democratic Party establishment, and therefore with the globalists that are ensconced within it, really for Mr. Kennedy began with the whole issue of pandemics and vaccines and everything else. So a very, very interesting development, very telling. We'll see where this goes. I view this with a mixed degree of both optimism and skepticism. Optimism in that I'm glad that someone is standing up and saying no to all of these global loony institutions like the World Health Organization or the United Nations and so on. But I'm also skeptical because I've been watching the Republicans since I was a boy come out and make these grandiose promises that they're going to stand up this time and fight tooth and nail. And of course, we know that the grand old party has really not a very good track record of fighting very long nor hard for anything. So we'll see if this happens. We'll see if they're really serious about fighting, because if they are serious, we have to see signs of them putting into place an infrastructure that will enable them to fight. Now, there are certain indicators that, yes, they're doing that with these state bullion depositories and constitutional money declarations and so on and so forth. But even those things can be traps, folks. So we're going to have to look to other types of things, and I think one of the keys there is, are they setting up interstate regional compacts? To give you an example of what I mean, will the Texas State Bullion Depository take deposits from non-Texan citizens and honor those deposits, and will any certificates of deposit be circulatable as currency among the states signing a compact with Texas, and so on and so forth? In other words, we need to see beyond declaration. We need to see that they're putting teeth or potential teeth behind the declaration. So it's going to be interesting to see if that happens. It will be interesting to see if Mr. Kennedy would be involved in any of those efforts or not. Very interesting times that we're living in, folks. That's it for today's news and views from the Nefarium. Thank you to WG for sharing this article with us. We'll see you on the flip side, everybody. Bye-bye, and God bless.